What is up, everyone? Happy Thursday, March 3rd. Chris Manning here from the Locked on Cavs podcast with my co-host, Evan Dammarell. On today's show, it's all about Cavs Hornets, which the Cavs lost 119-98 as Darius Garland returned from a back injury. Let's get into today's show.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A couple of housekeeping notes before we get into it. First, want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available on all the platforms, including YouTube. If you're just joining us for the first time, I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and the NBA for places like Dime, SB Nation for the Sword, and others. Evan, in case you aren't hip with it, covers the Cavs primarily for Facebook's Right to Euclid and writes at places like Fear the Sword as well. You can subscribe to Right to by checking out a link in the show notes below. Today's show, first segment, big takeaway on Cavs Hornets. Second takeaway, our awards. Third segment, we're going to clean out our notebooks from the game and talk a little bit about where we're at right now. But Evan, buddy, how are you?
Not a whole lot, man. It is a beautiful Thursday morning. My Tarnished and Elden Ring is becoming a Magus build. I'm looking forward to it. Not Maga, but Magus. So a Mage Knight. And I'm doing good, all things considered. How are you?
I'm doing good. We are going through a tricky part of this Cavs schedule. You'll hear a very hoarse JB Bickerstaff in this first segment that I think encapsulates a little bit what it's like after he was ejected last night and things. But Evan, I think the big takeaway for this game is pretty simple, right? I think this is a tough loss. This is not like a loss that will define the season in any way. This is not a loss that will necessarily. Well, let me finish. This is not a situation where I think like this is a loss that will 100% impact everything going on right now, right? But I think what it shows you is that there's some stuff that needs to be fixed. There's stuff that needs to be figured out for this team in terms of its execution, in terms of its ability to kind of play at the level that they were before. Things are not quite as tight on either end of the floor. Darius Garland returning helps some things. He looked pretty good and healthy, but it didn't result in a win. And like to lose to a Hornets team like that is good, right? That is in the playoff and all that stuff. And like have it be a game where like LaMelo Ball like did make an impact for them. Their all-star guard did not make us like really like a leak of an impact due to foul trouble in this game, and the Cavs just kind of got beat. Like it was never really felt like competitive. And I think even though the Cavs are 10 games before 500, all of that's kind of a tricky place to be when you look at we're in March and the Cavs are trying to kind of I think learn how to grow up here in real time. I think that to me is what we're seeing.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that for sure. I think JB Bickerstaff, Jared Allen, Darius Garland, whoever really has talked about it as of late. I'm just focusing on the guys who spoke to media last night after the loss to Charlotte. This is part of the growing pains that you and I were kind of hesitant to really crown the Cavs about, just because we had our reservations, and I think they're just kind of hitting that patch where they are age-wise one of the younger teams in the league. They are one of the youngest starting lineups in the league overall, and there's going to be some obvious growing pains with that. There's going to be some times where they have to learn how to win because, let's be frank, I mean, Jared Allen says all the time, the Cavs were not a winning team until this year after LeBron left, and it's been really tough to build out of that hole, obviously. But this is kind of a gut check win for them. Well, it's not win, loss for them, where you really need to see what the mettle of this team is. Let's see how they look against Philly on Friday. I think obviously they have practiced today as we're recording, but they'll probably do some film review, maybe some walkthroughs. We'll see who is and isn't available. Markkanen rolled his ankle during this game. Garland said his back was fine, but that's always just going to be an ongoing concern, I think. But I'm more interested to see how this team responds against Philly, because it felt like the bottom kind of gave out for the Cavs. That was like one of my biggest takeaways, is like defensively, they're objectively a mess post All-Star break.
Yeah, I think like numbers wise, the last couple weeks, like they've remained like they're worse than they were, but it is still like better than the average. But it is not like the
No, I know. I'm saying they were like up here.
Yeah.
Now they're like down here and
above average,
teetering towards
and the
here.
offense is like and that remains like the solution of winning there. It becomes sort of tricky, right? Like I mean, I think this is a good point to bring in the JB Bickerstaff. This is what JB Bickerstaff said. He was asked by from Valley Sports about like where they're kind of at right now, basically, and Again, like JB, I think is annoyed by this. He has referenced the trenches and the grit and the grind and the scrap like a lot lately, as have the players. But I think he's like I don't think he's seeing a team that is like playing as hard. And this is where he outlined where the Cavs, who are a young team, is he and Jared Allen, and as you've alluded to, have reminded. But here's what JB had to say after the game. I think this was, to me, Evan, the most impactful clip from post game. So let's hear it, and then we'll talk about it.
About it a lot. How concerning is that?
It's one of those things where if you look at the big picture and the entire process of where we are and where we're going through, and being a young team that's still trying to figure out how to win in this league, and we've talked about it from the beginning of the year, that, every game, every patch of games is a learning experience. Every test, every challenge that this group is going to be in is a new test and a new challenge. We still believe, in each other, and we believe that we're a good basketball team. But the hardest thing to do in this league is to replicate and sustain success. And that's where, the good players, the good teams go from good to great. And so if, some of these losses bring us back, to the mentality that we've had of the toughness, the physicality, the scrap, then it's worth it in the end. Because again, this is our process and we are still learning and still figuring out. At this point, we're 10 games over 500. Our group has done a lot of good things this year. This is one of the fights that we're learning to fight through right now.
I think that encapsulates it perfectly. Like, I think this is a team that is really young. They will go through, whatever playoff series they get. I think this is the kind of test that awaits them. They're gonna learn what it takes to survive an 82-game season. This is never good. This was never gonna be, Evan. I think this is one of the things we read about. This is never gonna be upwardly linear. This is gonna be up and down. This is gonna be ebbs and flows. This is gonna be a process. Like, even if some stuff is progressing as they're struggling, like, that does not indicate like they're not broken, right? Like, this isn't a team that is in total free fall, but they are learning and taking punches. And that's part of, I think, being a team whose best players are all like 21 and under, who has are going actually through having expectations and winning games for the first time. Like, this feels natural to me almost.
A wise philosopher named Tyronn Lue once said, "It's not about wins and losses, it's about wins and lessons." And the Cavs it's about midterms finals time, I think, for kids in college right now. So they're getting close to that. Maybe they're gearing up for that. Maybe this is their biggest lesson, like you said. Let's be frank. This season overall has been an overwhelming success for Cleveland. JB did note that they are 10 games over 500. And the fact that we're even talking about them being in the playoff hunt and kind of fighting for playoff positioning is a win in itself for the Cavs. I'm not saying that they should settle for that. They should obviously shoot for the moon. If they miss, they land amongst the stars. Just really full of cliches this morning, folks. But thank you. I appreciate the one-man applause. I hope everyone else is clapping with Chris right now. But this is just kind of like you said, we got this right. There were going to be concerns about this team being so young. And like a lot of people were saying we were idiots because we're like, well, I don't see it because they're obviously just emphatically beating teams, and people are pointing at advanced metrics saying like, oh, this is sustainable, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, objectively speaking, this Cavs team is going to hit a lull and they're going to regress a little bit. And I want to see how they respond after that.
Yeah, look, they're dealing with injuries still right now. Like you pointed out, like this is the first time they'd had that starting lineup in like 2 months last night. Like Karis LeVert is still out. Like
I didn't point that out on the show. I pointed that out to you personally. But yes, this is the first time the Cavs had this starting lineup in 2 months.
Yeah, that's what I said last night when I saw you last night.
You led with it, made it seem like I said it on the show.
Well, that's my bad. But this is just a weird situation, and like they're navigating some stuff, and like I think this feels natural. After the break, we're going to talk about awards, which were hard to do for a weird game, but we're going to do it because that's what we do here. And those awards, if you're joining us for the first time, are MVP stat of the night and play of the night. But first, Evan, I'm going to tell everyone about our friends from BetOnline. Look, BetOnline is the official betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And look, football might be over. The combine's on, but like actual games are over. But basketball is full steam ahead with pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, and more, right to your favorite other random sports you might like. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn about the trends and action going on right now. That is BetOnline, and that is where the game starts. Check them out today. All right, we are back. The Locked On Cavs podcast, your daily look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm Chris. That is Evan. Evan, I think there's one choice for MVP, and that is Darius Garland. 33 points, 4 assists, 7 turnovers in his return. Not a perfect game, but a solid Darius Garland game, and he was kind of a part of the reason why they did make that little push in the fourth before the Hornets kind of slammed the door shut.
Yeah, he looked really good. I think him saying that he only had a little bit of rust in the first quarter was probably a little bit of swagger on his part, but he really didn't look like he missed a beat after he kind of took a couple little hit. Like I think he was testing his body, just making sure he could take a couple hits and just keep moving. Jared Allen did note that there's going to be a little bit of a drop off, and the Cavs just kind of need to pick up and learn how to play with him again, just because, again, the ebbs and flows of the season and injuries just kind of unfortunately taking their toll on the Cavs. But yeah, Garland was the easy pick on this one. If he wasn't playing and if it was Brandon Goodwin, and again, no disrespect to Brandon Goodwin, this would have been the worst margin of defeat by far for the Cavs. This already was the worst margin of defeat by far for the Cavs, but Garland being there kind of prevented it from being way worse than it actually was.
He was, I think, fine. A little bit off. 7 turnovers even with the points is just sort of a tricky thing to say in like loss. So it's like hard to give like a MVP in a loss, but like we did it. So Evan, let's play the night. I'm gonna let you go first because yours is funny and mine is not because I am me.
Well, no, I have a serious one, but my initial play of the night pick was Dylan Windler, Darius Garland, and Colin Sexton dropping straight heat to the tune of 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. And Dylan Windler's got bars, man. Like, the basketball.
He doesn't, but
he's like, I'm rewatching Game of Thrones, so he's like the directors from that, the showrunners for that. If they have good source material, they provide something solid. They provide a solid known commodity. If I asked Dylan Windler to write his own rap on the fly, a la like Lil Dicky and Dave when he's just, in the think tank, or the very first episode where he spends his bat mitzvah money, you're not going to get that. But my serious play of the night pick was Larry Markkinen playing to his God-given. Thank you for the airplane, but
no, that was just
Larry Markkinen.
Wasn't an airplane.
Well, my actual play of the night pick was Larry Markkinen playing to his God-given size and just with that hammer dunk, LeBron-esque, if you will. I couldn't think of a pun that had Larry Markkinen and LeBron James mixed together, but
Air Finland would have sufficed more than the LeBron comparison.
Yeah, but it was a good dunk. I'm a simple man. 'Twas cool is what I put in the notes. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's your turn, buddy.
Well, good things happen when guys are on the floor and you get them stuff. Mine is an Isaac Okoro dunk because I am me and I am Chris. But had a steal in the second quarter, just pushes literally just goes as hard as he can to the other end, beats Miles Bridges to the rim, dunks it. Like a simple play, useful, important for the Cavs, like having some defense and offense. Like one of the moments where you just see like that, the Markkinen dunk, some of the other like little things we saw are reminders that like there are still positive moments and like they can do stuff. And defensively, I think Okoro was like good, like particularly on like the LaMelo Ball and some other guys last night. But this was like one of the brief moments where like Cavs kind of put the Hornets in a weird spot and pushed and. It's not. I think it also kind of encapsulates something JB and Jared hit on after the game, which was they have had success. Even if it is not like fast break buckets like that, they've turned defense into positive offense. And I think we're not when they string together stops, when they force some turnovers, which they don't do a ton of, but when they do, it like usually results in good things for them. that's like been key to their success, and that isn't happening right now. It's just, I mean, they've lost 2 in a row. I think 5 of 6 right now. It's like they're in a little bit of a weird space, and part of the reason why is I think things are not kind of going as cleanly in that regard in terms of the defense going into offense. So I think that is why that is my pick. Okay, stat of the night, Evan. Right now, the Cavs are 0.03 percentage points ahead of the Boston Celtics for 5th in the East. Both these teams are 4.5 games back in the standings of the number 1 seeded. I'm even sure it's number 1 right now of the Miami Heat, who were 1 game up last night, even after losing to the Bucks last night. The Cavs are at 1, and the Celtics are both 1.5 games back of the 4 seeded Bucks. But the Cavs are really in right now. If they want to avoid, a 6-3 Philly first round matchup, or maybe Milwaukee gets to 3 or whatever, this is going to be worth monitoring. And if you look down the list a little bit, Charlotte is, a full 6 games back of the Cavs. There's some cushion there with not enough season left. But Toronto, who they play on Sunday, is only 1.5 games back of the Cavs and the Celtics. Sunday will be a very important game as far as the standings go. And for me, it is not like from the game last night. It is not a number that we saw like of a stat from this game. It is, this Eastern Conference race is very tight. That is exciting to cover. That is exciting to think about. If you're a fan and you're stressed, I get it. But this is tight, and it's worth noting.
Yeah, no, that's there it is. That's what I kind of noted on last night in front of the pod. Justin Rowan correctly pointing out that Cleveland does have a tiebreaker over Toronto. So Toronto plays
to have 2 games in hand over Boston. So but the way what that basically means is Boston has already played 2 more games than the Cavs. So the Cavs have 2 games to, like, if they need to, they have those games. You'd rather maybe just have the wins, but they have some flexibility here going forward if they can win the 2 extra games that they have.
No, absolutely. And let's say Cleveland loses to Philadelphia on Friday, and I know they struggled against the Knicks last night, but just given how Cleveland's played as of late, how juiced the Sixers are with Harden and Embiid, it's going to be a tough game. It could be a loss. Let's say that happens, and let's say Toronto, who plays Detroit and Orlando, 2 teams trying to lose. They'll likely win those because they're a well-coached team, the Raptors. They'll be tied record-wise, and like Chris said, Sunday's game could have some serious implications because the Cavs would be back in the play-in conversation at that point. I mean, I know it's 7, 8, 9, 10, correct? That playoff for the play-in?
It is, yeah, it's 7, 8, 9, 10.
So the Cavs are obviously trying to avoid that. I think people are saying, like, oh, they're not going to make the playoffs. The season's over. They're a full 8 games above the 8th-seeded Wizards right now, 20 games to go. I think the Cavs are going to make the playoffs at the end of the day. I think more realistically, they want to try and tread water and stay at the 6th seed or above at this point because you want to avoid the play-in, because nothing would suck harder than to catch a team on a bad day, or the right day for them, bad day for the Cavs, and they just have their season just come to an end in the play-in tournament, and then we can complain about how the format isn't fair. But
which I love the format personally. You gotta win, and look, if they're 7, they'll have 2 chances to win a game in advance, but it's obviously not an optimal place to be in.
You and Adam Silver the opposite. He listens to everything Twitter says, and you just ignore it completely. But
that's
at the same. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I think it's going to be really interesting to see like the posturing and all of that happening. But my stat of the night pick, I just want to make sure I have the numbers correct here. Charlotte shot 17 of 38 from 3. Cleveland shot 10 of 31 from 3. That's a 7-make difference, obviously. Like the sub-op. In terms of your 3-point shooting, Sparkin is 2 of 6. Garland is 5 of 10. Osmond is 2 of 5. Love was 1 of 3. And that's it. Excuse me, that's all there was for the Cavs in terms of shooting. Like, that's just not ideal, obviously. Dale Reuter from 92.3 The Fan was kind of pointing out the press box. He's like, I just don't know why the Cavs just don't go to Allen and Mobley every single play because Charlotte has no interior defense. Well, it's because the Cavs have no perimeter defense right now, and they were getting shredded by Kelly Oubre Jr., who is just absolutely red hot. Isaiah Thomas, who completed his revenge game against the Cavs as well. Like, it's suboptimal. I think the Cavs need to kind of figure that out. I think getting Garland back into the fold helps, and maybe just him being out there provides gravity. But Love being not on is not great. Osmond kind of being off is not great. Like, the bench also just being outscored in general could be my other stat of the night. Like, bench points, Cleveland was outscored 54-22 in terms of bench production. So Not good. Like I said, I think this is a gut check game. I think JB Bickerstaff and the team needs to do some soul searching, maybe figure out who they are, and try and show up against Philly and just show that maybe the season isn't falling apart at the seams. Because I have my fears that we're on the precipice of the Cavs just tumbling down.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the guy that would help them, Karis LeVert, who they traded to help them, is hurt right now, so that also complicates this. All right, after the break,
Oh yeah.
we're going to talk about JB Bickerstaff's ejection and sort of the frustrations boiling over in that way. But Evan, you're first going to tell everyone about our friends at Rock Auto.
You are absolutely correct, sir. This episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why spend up to 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low and are for every customer. They have everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On, and they're happy to hear about us box, so they know that we sent you.
All right, we're back here on Locked On Cavs. That's Chris. I'm sorry, I'm Chris. He is Evan. Good Lord, my brain. Anyway, Evan, JB Bickerstaff.
That's a compliment to be confused with Chris Manning.
It's not. I have a lot of problems. The Cavs lost last night, obviously, and JB Bickerstaff was ejected in this loss. He lost. He has been frustrated to the point where, like, he mentioned that on media the other day that he's been using throat coat because his voice sounds extremely hoarse right now. So he's been yelling a lot, TLDR. And, I look at this and I don't, like, have a clear reason to think that, like, his ejection was, like, unfair. I don't know if he was, like, right or wrong or whatever. I think just this was coming. Like, I am not surprised that, like, at a certain point, JB did just get frustrated enough to get ejected, right? Like, I just looked at this and was like, he's been very annoyed at the refs for, like, 2 weeks. I kind of like he picked up a technical the other night. Like I felt like this was coming almost, and the frustration was just kind of coming through to the surface in a way.
Yeah, JB, I think, was just going to throw this one in the old fuck it bucket. You could tell, like, the frustrations are boiling over. You could tell he was pissed off from the press box. Like, it was palpable, his anger from towards the officials. He was asked post game if he knew whether or not what the call was on Jetty Osman that caused him to have that reaction get rejected. He just said, I couldn't hear it, which either means, one, it was so loud in there because the fans are booing, two, he was so pissed that he just couldn't hear anything at that time. I wouldn't be surprised if we get an email from the league later today saying he was fined $20,000 because he didn't leave their court in a timely manner, because he was really yelling at the officials after that one. But I think it's just a lot of frustration. I think Jared Allen said it well, where because JB shared with us post game that he apologized to his team, he apologized to his coaching staff, he has apologized to his kids because he wants to lead by example and he can't lead if he's not out there, and a lot of coaching cliches. But I think it's just kind of the person he is too, where, like, he didn't, because Jared Allen's like, he didn't need to apologize, but that's just kind of the person he is. And it makes sense because JB just seems like that guy who would apologize for something like that.
Yeah.
And I agree with Allen. He didn't need to apologize, but it's interesting stuff.
That's the first time he's been ejected as Cavs head coach. Frankly, like, it was once he exploded out of the court and, like, 3 assistant coaches came to get him, like, it was that was going to happen. But Evan, I want to end on this. What have you made of Garland talked about it last night, saying, quote, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and just reel everything in and ask yourself if I'm doing the right thing. Isaac Okoro mentioned this the shoot around on Wednesday, just the team having to get back to some of that stuff. Jared Allen has talked about it last night, and I said it before. He said, quote, if we're not concerned, I don't think that's a good way to look at how we're playing. And at the end of the day, we know that that's not who we are. We know that that's not Cavs basketball. We know that's not how we've been playing for this past however long the season has been going. It's just effort at the end of the day. It's just looking inside of who we are as a team, as individuals, just playing hard. What do you make of the fact that is the kind of the company line right now? This is like an effort concern.
I mean, talk is cheap. You have to go out there and prove it. You obviously, these guys are some of the first to show up to practice, and they have to be the last to leave. A bunch of those cliches and stuff. the Cavs are saying all the right things. I need them to go out and actually show that they can back up that talk too, because you can keep saying all these right things like, oh, because Jared Allen got pressed on it a few times last night. We're like, well, what's wrong? Why is this season kind of falling apart? Why aren't you guys like so cohesive defensively? And Jared's just like, I don't know. And then he at one point said, guys, I keep saying I don't know because I don't know. And like, I have nothing else to say. So part of me wonders if the Cavs are a little dazed and surprised with how much they've struggled post All-Star break and just kind of how they're struggling heading into the All-Star break. And maybe there's no like actual remedy. Like I floated this idea to you. Maybe they just punt on practice one day and they go do like a team bonding activity, or they do something to help clear the air a little bit and just kind of take a little bit of this pressure and this onus off themselves, because there is pressure associated with the season. It's the first non-LeBron team since 97, 98 to make the playoffs. They are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference for a while. They have two All-Stars on their roster and two rising stars as well, and they were well represented at All-Star weekend. Like there's a lot hitting the Cavs at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I think JB Bickerstaff kind of noted on this too, where they weren't used to being in the spotlight, and they like were this underdog mentality, quote unquote, where they have to go back and find that. But he's like, we read all the press clippings, we see all the news, like the talking heads in the news shows talking about how great we are. And I think they're letting that get to them a little bit. That's what Bickerstaff said, not me. And it's interesting to think about like what can they do to kind of reverse course, because they used to be underestimated. And now the team a lot of opposing teams know what they're going to get when they play the Cavs on a nightly basis. So it's going to be a lot of adjustments, and next week's going to be brutal for record wise. So hopefully they figure it out sooner instead of later.
Yeah, I think the thing I just sort of come down to on this is, I think this is part of growing up for them. Like I think this was coming at some point. I think this kind of stretch.
It's just unfortunate it's coming right now when like the games really matter.
But it like makes sense that it would come now, right? Because you've played this long 82-game season. You had like this very fun All-Star weekend. You're going through a tough part of the schedule. Like the playoffs are coming. Like this, to me, makes some sense, because this is gut check time. This is the part of the season where things get real. It becomes hard to like, not a ton of like quote unquote like news happens, but there's a lot of games. There's a lot of implications with these games. Like I think the positive of them going through this right now would be that they learn how to deal with this going forward. Not just like in the playoffs will be their own thing. Like they will grow. Like they will. I think like even if they lose in the first, like there's going to be a benefit of them like getting into the playoffs and having a series. Like if it's against Philly, whomever, like there will be a clear benefit.
Playoff experience is invaluable.
For them.
Like full stop.
And like it is just different. It is physically, mentally, emotionally a different thing. Any player, like it is one that has gone through it. It is true. But I think like them learning how to navigate an 82-game season like that have some benefit going forward if this team is, I think, as interesting as we think it is. So we'll see where this goes. On tomorrow's show, Friday show, we are going to cover Cavs 76ers. We are going to look ahead to Cavs Raptors, because we'll not be back until Monday. Maybe we'll do like a mini thing on the weekend of some kind, but we're not going to get deep into those games till Monday. And then we're going to do one last LeBron segment, because there's a little nugget in a recent Jake Fisher report that I think we should just touch on, and then online till I guess he's in town in like 10 days or whatever. But thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available on all platforms. If you're looking for a great second listen, may I suggest Locking Expertly? That is, you can listen right now wherever you listen to Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris. That's Evan. Everyone be well. Have a great Thursday, and keep it straight with yourself.